So today we need to look at Microsoft Defender for Cloud. The configurations that we did the other day for Defender for Cloud, we need to validate the configuration and effective and its effectiveness. That's what we need to do. Then we need to talk about Microsoft Sentinel. And today we will configure. So yesterday we basically configured default analytics rule in Sentinel, wherein I configured a couple of default analytics rule. I also talked about workbook, the concept, the dashboards, pre-configured dashboards or workbooks which are available. Today we are going to configure custom analytics rule. Rules. And then in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, I will ensure I'll type it MDE. We'll configure additional policies. So this is the agenda for today. This is what we are going to work or focus on today. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes.
Yes, no, maybe?
Yes.
Okay, so let's start with Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Now, if you remember what we did in Microsoft Defender for Cloud, when we started with Microsoft Defender for Cloud, we basically enabled Microsoft Defender for Cloud plans. And so we basically enabled MDC plans for various Azure services. Azure services, or I can say Azure resources. That's what we did last time, wherein we enabled the plan for server, for for databases, for resource group, for additional for storage accounts. That's what we did. Then we enabled some regulatory standards and compliance. That's what we did. We enabled some regulatory standards and compliance, which I remember I did PCI, DSS, CIS benchmarks for Microsoft Azure version 2.0, Microsoft Cloud Security benchmarks. That's what I remember doing it. So we enabled some regulatory standards and compliances, and then we also configured some capabilities across CWPP, which is we configured file integrity monitoring, we configured just-in-time access, we configured vulnerability management. So those are the things that we configured. So let's just go ahead and check this part. Let's quickly validate, because now we will need that information coming. So let's do the validation. All of you, please navigate to Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Under Microsoft Defender for Cloud, the first thing that we need to validate is whether our plans are up and running. Over here, you've already got the information, some information in terms of security alerts, attack paths, and other information. So let's first start with the validation of whether all the plans are up and running, right? So how do I validate that information? I can directly go to security posture. I see my subscription. Okay, not here. I can go to environment settings. And under environment settings, I can see my subscription listed. And then I can click on Azure, our subscription, wherein I can see that I have my plans enabled. So for log analytics workspace, all the plans are enabled. And for subscription, I have actually enabled required plans because it involves cost. So I did not just enable everything that was available. I just enabled what I actually needed, right? So these things are enabled. When it comes to regulatory standards and compliances, I enabled so it's coming up. We need to be a bit patient here. Okay, so when it comes to the regulatory standards and compliances, I actually enabled Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark. I enabled CIS benchmarks, and I also remember enabling PCI DSS benchmarks. That's what I did. So this is the second thing that I did. Now what I need to validate, so I validated that my plans are enabled, which is good. Then I validated that regulatory compliances are enabled, right? And then I configured some capabilities in the Defender. So let's look at those capabilities. So I'll directly go to cloud. I'm saying under cloud security, you navigate to workload protections and you see the capabilities at the bottom, which is vulnerability management, just-in-time access, application control, file integrity monitoring. So this is all here. Network map is here, which is good, right? Now I've got some severities, alerts, and everything here that we will need to look at. So this is what I have. Now, what I need to validate here is that the regulatory compliances that I enabled the other day, probably 2-3 days before, have they, have those compliances been assessed and analyzed by Defender? If yes, then what is my percentage of adherence to it? What is the result of that analysis? That's what I need to analyze. So as a Defender for Cloud admin or Defender for Cloud user or consumer, this is what you need to do. So I'll navigate to the, I'm saying, so when I want to see it, I'll directly go to regulatory compliance. And over here, I'll see my compliances. So you can see here, I have a total of 3 compliances or standards enabled. I have Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmarks enabled, which has a total of 65 controls, out of which I've been able to pass 45 controls. Now, obviously, this is a lab environment. You don't have many services configured. You don't have services of all type configured. You don't have thousands of users doing inbound and outbound transactions all the time. But whatever capacity we have in our environment, from that capacity perspective, from those service perspective, this is the status that we have right now, which is out of a total of 65 controls, I've been able to pass, or my configuration has been able to pass the 45 one, right? So look for yourself. And when it comes to the other one, so that is not all. I have other compliances also configured. So if I go to the other one, which is CIS benchmarks, it comprises of a total of 121 controls. Out of those 121 controls, I've been able to pass 94 controls. And same is the case with PCI DSS4, wherein the number of controls are 206, and I've been able to pass 189 controls. So this is the current standard or the current status of my Azure configuration, my Azure resources configuration, because these controls are primarily evaluating how have I configured my Azure resources, and basis on that, they are giving me this information. So as an engineer or as a professional, your job is to try and pass 100% of the controls. Now, 100% may not be possible because sometimes some controls would ask you to enable additional services that you do not require in your account, or you probably may not have budget for it. So in that case, you will not be able to get 100% of the compliance. But even though you will have a specific control configured as exclusion. So this is what we need to do. So as an engineer, when it comes to in Microsoft Defender for Cloud, when it comes to cloud security posture management, so when it comes to cloud security posture management, your job will always be to evaluate current security score, and so you will always evaluate current security score and ensure to get it near to 100%. However, as per the best practices, it is always said that any score of 95% and above is a great score. 95% and above is a great score. So as long as it is 95% and above, it's a great score. So let's understand what is my current security score. So if I go to security posture, this is security posture. So I'll click on the overview tab. Over here, you will see everything. So if I go to the security posture, my score is really bad, I would say. So this is the secure score, which is 12% only. Now 12% is really bad. So which basically means, and the reason it has gone down because of multiple standards and compliances that I have enabled. The more evaluation you will do, you will get less score. But there is an advantage also. When I'm able to satisfy the control of one requirement, the other may probably have the same control, it will automatically get satisfied. So this is my current score, guys, which is really bad. I must say 12%. What is your current score? What score do you have? Can you just look into yours and tell me what is your current score?
I have
27.
Okay, you have at least good score.
Mine is 47%. Hello.
Yes.
Mine is 47%.
47%, which is good. What about others?
Miles for
Mine is
47%.
31.
What about others?
34%.
Okay.
%47.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is 39%.
Okay. Now let's just evaluate the score. Okay. So we've got a very bad score, but that's okay. Any score has an opportunity. So this gives us more opportunity to fix these issues, right? What if your score was 98% or 89%, 90%? Then it means that you have less opportunities to engage and to understand the concept. So you have more opportunities. So if I look at my score, which is 12%, I also see that I have 9 out of 14 resources unhealthy. There are 2 attack paths also. right? So I'll look into this. So I'll click on recommendations. Now you all click on recommendations, the respective recommendations that you have. I want you all to look at the recommendations, go through it and see what all recommendations you are getting. These recommendations that you see here, what all recommendations you are getting and what needs to be done to make sure to have that recommendation fulfilled so that it give you an opportunity to increase the score. So I'll give you 5 minutes. Just go through all the recommendations one by one. So for example, if I see I've got a couple of recommendations under storage accounts for my domain controller VM, there are multiple recommendations. And then I have additional. So I can click on affected resource and that will sort this. So all the virtual machines I will see, then all the storage accounts, then I have a key vault also. I see everything, right? And I have sorted it here. So let's just go ahead and look at this information. So I'll give you 5 minutes to just pick up one affected resource at a time. For example, one virtual machine, one storage account, one network, or anything of that sort, and read that and then just go through it and see that what exactly you need to do to have that satisfied. Okay, so let's do that. All right. Is everyone done?
Yes.
Okay. So let me show you a couple of things. So under cloud security posture management, as I said, the primary task is to evaluate the current security score, or you can say current security posture score, and ensure to get it near to 100%. Any score which is 95% and above is a good score. Now, when it comes to how do you get it to 95% or 100, you need to evaluate, or you need to basically look for failed controls and remediate them. So we need to look for failed controls and remediate them. So let's see how we do it. So if I specifically talk about my environment, over here, I see all of this, right? So, for example, if I'll just focus on critical one for a moment. Obviously, everything is important, but let's just focus on a critical one for a moment. So what are my risk level critical one controls? So I can see my critical one control is related to this storage account. There are 5 critical controls which are failed for the storage account. The same storage account, which are storage account should restrict network access using virtual network rule. So this storage account is configured for public access, which means anybody can connect to the storage account. And as per the best practice, it says that your storage account should not be configured to have public access. It should always be restricted to certain network or IP address. So only resources from that network or IP address can access the storage account. That's the best practice for storage accounts. And that's exactly where this control is failing. So you can see also wherever you see the information that what is this control, and if required, you can also assign a ticket ID and do things. For example, it says this method is preferred over IP-based filtering, which can leave your storage account vulnerable to threats if public IPs gain access. If IP-based filtering is not disabled, your storage account should be, so it says it should restrict network access, right? Which means nobody should be able to access the storage account. And this control is refreshed every 30 minutes, which means every 30 minutes it changes. The last time the change was done, last time any change on this storage account was done on 8th of June, the last week when I was explaining you the storage account part, right? So this is where this change was done when I was covering the storage security in Microsoft Azure cloud. That is where I was doing it. Now it says, what are my action? This is my action which I have. So these are the options that I get. Now this is where I can remediate. Remediate basically means I can fix it, which is to protect your storage account from potential threats using virtual network rule. So it says that go ahead and click on networking, and then from there allow access to selected network. Do not keep it public access. That's what it says. Second option, I can delegate. I can use Defender for Cloud built-in governance mechanism or ServiceNow ITSM integration to assign the recommendation to the right owner. So I can also, I'm saying probably the remediation requires elevated access, or it requires collaboration from different teams, and I don't have that access. So I can go ahead and assign owner. Now I can pick up any identity in my account and I can assign it. So you can say it's Defender for Cloud or ServiceNow. I'll say Defender for Cloud. Now in Defender for Cloud, I can set the owner. I can enter user account or group name, whatever that user account is. Let's say I'll say that this needs to be done by PIMadmin. So I can type PIMadmin. Now this is the user. Now it says please provide a valid email address. Now obviously I've not created mailboxes for these users. So what I'll do, I'll provide the users UPN, because UPN and the mailbox will always remain the same. So I'll go to the portal. I'll navigate to Entra ID, navigate to users, and let's say I'm assigning it to PIMadmin. I'll pick up this user principal name because this will be the email address also in a production environment. Then I'll go to the policy. I'll come here and I'll put the UPN of the PIMadmin. So here you can see UPN of the PIMadmin, and I'll select it. So this user will be assigned as owner to remediate this failure, this control failure or vulnerability. Then I can provide the remediation time frame, that but by what time this should be resolved. So I'll say that this should be resolved, let's say by tomorrow. I can also give them a grace period. Grace period basically means that if I select the grace period, the secure score will not get affected. What will happen? You will get the marks for this specific control by default. So I will not apply grace period. Then email notifications, I notify owners weekly. So this is the owner for this control who needs to fix it by 15th tomorrow. And if they are not fixing it, every week they will get the owner, they will get the email. And also I can also notify the direct manager so that they will have some accountability on themselves to fix it. And I can put the email configuration of the week, because you are sending email notifications. So when are you sending the email notification? So I've said that every Monday, the email notification will go to the owner if this is not completed, and will also go to the manager of the owner. So this is how I can create an assignment. So now the assignment is created. The PIMadmin owner will automatically be notified. So PIMadmin will get an email, and when PIMadmin owner comes here to this recommendation, they will also get the notification. It will take the user to this blade where the user need to do it. So that's delegation. Then comes exemption. Exemption basically means probably this is an intended configuration. I'm saying this storage account is hosting some public data, and I want the data to be accessible by my users, my application users, or public at large. For example, I'm a manufacturing firm. I manufacture cars, and for each car there is a manual. So I give that manual to the buyer at the time of delivery of the car. But sometimes buyer misplaces the manual, or they forget it, or it is lost. So what I do, I also have a website wherein I keep all the manuals. Now that website is hosted in Azure storage account, and hence it has to remain public. So it could be an intended behavior also. If this is an intended behavior, then I will click on exempt. I'll say, please exempt this finding, which basically means that for this control, I'll get full marks, and Defender will consider this as an accepted risk, and definitely as per the risk governance process, it will go into my risk register. So this is where I can exempt it. So you can see, you can exempt a recommendation from any scope to that it doesn't affect your secure score. the resource status will change to not applicable. It might take up to 30 minutes for exemption to take effect. Why it takes 30 minutes? Because the freshness interval is 30 minutes. So here I can select the resource and I'll say that I'm putting this resource as an exemption because this is an intended behavior, let's say. So here I can put the exemption name. This is the exemption. I can put the expiration date also, that it will not be a permanent exemption. Probably it is by the end of this year. So I can set an expiration date and I can say the exemption is till December 31st, and then we will review this exemption once again, right? Then here you will always have the name of the user who is making this configuration, exemption category. So it's mitigated or waiver. I'm saying probably the exemption is because you resolved it through a third-party service, or you mitigated it, or you waived it. Waived means you accept the risk. So I'll say this is accepted the risk. So here you can say that this, and you can put the description, exemption description, this storage account contains public documents and hence it must be accessible over the public network. You'll put this information and you will hit create. So this is how you basically create the exemption, right? Then comes workflow automation. Workflow automation basically means that let's say it is asking you to put that into a virtual network, restrict the access to a virtual network. And for that, you have created a logic app. Logic app is a service in Azure using which you can create automation. You can create rules that will automatically apply. So if there is a logic app, you can also trigger that logic app and that will do its job. And then in the end, prevention. Prevention means enforce remediation for future resources or deny creation of misconfigured resources. Prevention basically means that I will fix this configuration today, and in future, no user will be allowed to provision resource with this configuration, which means when somebody will create a storage account, they will not be able to select public access. So what it will do, it will basically create a policy, an Azure policy rule that will not allow any user to create a storage account with public access configured on it. That's the logic of this prevention. I'm saying this deny. So I can select my subscription as my scope for this, and I can change to deny. So you can see it says update policy assignment. So it will create a policy, and that policy will ensure that going forward, no storage account will be created with public access allowed on it. That's the logic. Is everyone with me on this?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Give me a moment. All right. So this is what we basically do when it comes to managing recommendations that comes from secure score capability of Microsoft Defender for cloud. This is what people who work in MDC domain, this is what they typically do. So I've just given you the example of one. Similarly, you can take all of them. This also gives you graph wherein you basically see the service and its any dependencies of where that service is. So for storage account, there is no dependency. There is no, so that's, I'm saying it is not built under networks. You just see it here, right? So this is what it shows you basically, right? So let's go back to the recommendation once again, and let's pick up recommendation for another VM. So I'll pick up recommendation for a VM that I'm currently logged in. Let's say Windows 2019, the one which is currently running in my account, currently is in running state. For example, I have this recommendation which says management port should be closed on your VM. Now it's a common recommendation for all the VMs. Why? Because all my VMs are accepting traffic on port 3389 from internet, which is a vulnerability, which is against the cloud security. Why? Because management port should not be accessible from internet. It should only be accessible from internal network. But this is also an intended behavior because I don't have a VPN from my laptop to my virtual machines in Azure. That is the reason I'm putting a public IP so that I can RDP into it. I can SSH into it. So it's an expected behavior. But for Microsoft Azure, this is one of the control and I'm failing on that control. So this is how I see all the information. Now, once again, this is not assigned, so I can delegate it. But since this is an expected behavior, I can probably exempt it. So I'll exempt it and I'll say that this is exempted and I will probably exempt it for all the virtual machines in one go. So I'll select my subscription and I'll say this is the subscription. And in this subscription, I'll select the resource. Sorry, I'll select the subscription and I'll say that please exempt this control for this subscription, which includes all the resources, right? And I'll say please exempt it once again till December of this year. Then I will go ahead and reevaluate it. So that's how you take action. And in the waiver, I'll say this was kept, this is accepted. And I'll say in the absence of VPN from user devices, the management port must remain open, right? And I'll create this exemption. So that's how you've created the exemption in the policy. So similarly, you will continue to look for all the recommendations which are there because the recommendations, these recommendations are directly impacting your score. So if you want to increase the score, you need to make sure that you look for each recommendation and you either remediate it, you exempt it, or you assign or delegate it. That's what you need to do. So you can see storage account should prevent shared key access. Now shared key access is also enabled for these storage accounts because I've enabled the sharing. So it should disable the sharing, and the risk factor is their exposure to the internet. Because with the shared key enabled, storage account can be exposed to the internet. So this is another recommendation. Now let's look for a recommendation that had an attack path. So to understand the attack path concept. Attack path and remediation. So when it comes to attack path, you can see here, they all have an attack path. Why? It says management port should be closed. So if management ports are not closed, definitely a hacker can trigger an attack. So you are giving an attack path on your environment or attack surface area. This creates an attack surface area. That's what it is trying to say. But you have other recommendations also. For example, these are the recommendations, but it does not create any attack path. For example, look at this recommendation. This recommendation says that your virtual machine should enable Azure disk encryption or encryption at most. So it says that virtual machine disk must be encrypted. Now, even if you don't encrypt the disk of the virtual machine, it is expected that your virtual machine is private to your network, which means nobody has access it from outside. So that is why it doesn't have an attack path. Nobody can attack this virtual machine. Only insider attack may happen, but insider attack is not considered as attack surface area or attack path. That's the reason it doesn't have an attack path. So wheresoever you will see an attack path, it would always mean that there is a probability to attack or trigger, some malicious act on that virtual machine from outside of the network. And that's what only for management ports. So that's how you see the recommendations. Now let's go back to Microsoft Defender for Cloud once again. So I'll click on recommendations once again. I'll see the other attack path also that I have, which is this attack path. So I'll see both the attack paths right now. So these are the two attack paths that I have. And these two are high risk also. For example, internet exposed Azure VM with high severe vulnerabilities. So this this is a high severe vulnerability. Do you know why this is a high severe vulnerability? What is so special about this VM? Can somebody tell me why this VM is coming as high severe vulnerability and there is an attack path on this VM?
Maybe the
It
domain
is
controller.
internet facing. Internet facing.
Come again.
It is internet facing VM. We can.
If it has an internet facing VM, okay. What is so special about that VM other than being internet facing?
We can able to access
Active
from the public.
It's a domain controller.
It's an active directory.
domain controller.
Absolutely, that's the right answer. It is a domain controller. It's an Active Directory domain service VM, which means this contains all the information about your identities, your employees, their employee files, personal details, various sites, group policies, OU configurations, your connectivity across sites, your FSMO roles. This is a very critical server, critical role of any business or of critical role of an IT infrastructure. That is the reason it says that it qualifies for attack path analysis. So it says that A, this VM is internet exposed, which is management port is open. B, this VM is holding a critical role. So the Microsoft, the backend logic, which the backend logic understands that a DNS server, a DHCP server, an AD server, they are critical services for any organization. That is the reason it's a high severe vulnerability. So how can I fix this vulnerability? I'll click on this vulnerability. That's the reason it says it's a high severity vulnerability, right? And it gives you the example also that what can happen. It says that from the internet, this is the attack path, that the attack can be triggered from the internet to this IP address. This IP address is configured on this network interface, and that network interface belongs to this VM actually. So that's your attack path. So you get to see the attack path. You can see here this network interface is configured on this VM, ADDS VM. So this is your attack path analysis. So it gives you the analysis that how attack may get triggered. Now, if you want to contain this attack, what you need to do, you will need to make sure that on this network interface, I will either remove this public IP, or if I'm not removing the public IP, then I will need to disable the management port on this network interface so that nobody from internet can communicate to my VM. This is what attack path is all about, right? So it says attacker can exploit vulnerability via the internet and gain control of the VM, which is true. They can trigger a brute force attack, and if they are successful, they will have access to the VM. Attacker can execute code on Azure VM. Absolutely. From the internet, I can send a code on this VM because this VM has code opened on it, right? So there are three resources here: one virtual machine, one IP address, one network interface. And this is part of Mitre attack tactics, which is internet exposure and vulnerability, which are the risk factors. So if I want to fix it, I'll go to remediation, and the remediation says machine should have vulnerability findings resolved. This is the recommendations. So I know the recommendation for this VM. So what I will do, I will fix this part. So I'll go to this VM, ADDS VM. This is the VM. There are two VMs actually. So, and for both the VMs, there is this configuration. So I'll click on the VM here. Now there are two things that I can do. The first thing that I will do is I'll navigate to the network setting. And in the network setting, I will navigate to this rule, which is 3389 rule, which is from internet. It says any source from internet, I will deny this rule. I will block this rule, so that no traffic will be allowed on this VM from internet. I'll do the same thing for the other VM also. And I will deny this rule. So I've taken care of it, but this is partial. The next step is to remove the public IP from the VM, because that public IP, so right now only 3389 is disabled, but it may I'm saying it may get compromised in future. So what I will do, I will go ahead, I will navigate to the network. I will navigate to the network interface of this VM. Navigate to IP configuration. Then click on the IP config, and from here I will dissociate the public IP. I'll just uncheck the public IP and save it. So that way I have removed the public IP and I have also denied any traffic from internet on management port. So this is where I have made sure that my VM attack path is taken care of. The attack path is, addressed, and now my VM will not have any issues. Similarly, I can go to the other VM, go to its network settings, click on its network interface, IP config, and in the public IP, I'll uncheck the box and save it. So this is how I took care of the attack path analysis, which is very important concept of Microsoft Defender for endpoint. Now, I will need to see the refresh interval of this, which is typically a minimum of 30 minutes for all the resources. So in next 30 minutes, what will happen? These two findings will be resolved. Right now, they will continue to remain here, but in next 30 minutes, they will get resolved. And that way, I would have taken care of these findings. Okay, it says it's failed. Okay, why it is failing? Why it is failing? Because the VM is turned off. That's the reason it is failing. You can see here the virtual machine to which it is concerned. Those two virtual machines are turned off. So virtual machine must be up and running. Okay, so that's how we do it. We can see when we come to the, when we come to the owner here, we can also see PIM admin is the owner. The administrator, the Defender for Cloud administrator can anytime come to security posture, click on owner tab, and the owner and the admin will be able to see how many recommendations are still pending to get resolved or remediated and who the owners are. So I can see that PIM admin is one owner and which is overdue right now. And I can see that recommendation for which he is the owner. So this is the recommendation for which PIM admin is the owner, and status is right now on time because it should be resolved by tomorrow because I've selected 15th. So this is where I can take. So this is where you can do it. You can probably download this into a CSV. If there are multiple recommendations for an owner, and send an email to the owner reminding him of taking care of those recommendations, keeping the owner's manager in CC to have him accountable for the same. So that's what you basically can do. So there are possibilities. So the point is that if you want to do anything in Microsoft Defender for Cloud, this is the place where you do it. So you typically work under security posture, regulatory compliance, workflow recommendations. This is where you typically work. Firewall manager is nothing but a view of firewall manager service, which has a separate view also. And for DevOps security, you should have pipeline configured for it. So this is what you do. If you want to go to attack path analysis, you can directly click here. It will show you the attack path analysis for all the resources which are part of the scope of this analysis, and also the recommendations against it. So this is what you see. When you click on security alerts, you will see all the alerts here. So I will say in Defender for Endpoint, it says, in Defender for Endpoint, it basically says investigations. In Sentinel, it says incidents. And in Microsoft Defender for Cloud, it says security alerts. So here you see all the alerts basically. Right, and these are all sample alerts. You can basically click on here and you can generate sample alerts. So when you're delivering a POC of this product and you really don't have services configured in real time generating alerts, but you want to demonstrate the capability to your customer or to your prospects, you can always click on sample alerts, and it will generate sample alerts against all the services that Defender can protect. And you can just pick up the sample alert and talk about what that alerted, what it is able to identify and how you can fix it, right? Then you get a workbook also in Defender for Cloud. MDC workbooks. So when it comes to MDC workbooks, you get these workbooks. Workbooks are nothing but pre-configured dashboards. These are the workbooks. You can see Defender for Cloud, there are 10 workbooks, which is secure score over time. Let's say today you started with 12%. A week later, it increased to 47%. A month later, it is 90%. And probably 2 months later, it has come down to 67%. So you want to do a trend analysis of it, that how my secure score is improving or decreasing over a period of time. Then you can click on this workbook. It will basically give you that information. You just need to select your workspace and time range, and it will generate the dashboard for it. So you can see your secure score over a period of time. Obviously, for these type of data to come, you should have your services configured, up and running, and you in use in production for at least 2 weeks. So it says no data available. Check your continuous export configuration. Why the data is not coming here? Because my machines are not that old. First, they are not 2 weeks old. Second, I'm keeping them off most of the time. So that's the reason the data is taking time to come or is not coming. Right? But then I can show you other workbooks. So you can see compliance over time. Here you can select the workspace, select the subscription for which you want to see the compliance. Okay, it says it will only provide the report only after the first week snapshot occurs. So unfortunately, our environment is not a week old. That's the reason report is not coming. But at least you will know that workbooks are available that can give you the data, right? So you can see service-specific workbooks like DevOps security, API security, cost estimation. You can see the community workbooks, which is attack path analysis, Log4j vulnerability, container security, Defender CSPM capabilities. And here you will see the information. This is for CSPM. So here you can see that I have a secure score of 12% and it's already red right now as we speak, right? There are 2 attack paths which are available. Risk found are 2. Then I have Defender CSPM enabled, Defender for, so this basically shows that what all plans are enabled. So it shows that these plans are enabled and Defender for container is disabled. Then extensions that are enabled, which means sensitive data discovery is good, agentless discovery for Kubernetes. So you see all of this information here. So this is the workbook part that you need to see. Cloud Security Explorer. It basically shows you a couple of templates that you can use to see the security of your services. For example, if you want to see all the virtual machines in my subscription that are exposed to internet, the quick way to do it is you can just click on Open Query. It will quickly show you that information. So it is taking time to run. These are the queries basically. Okay, over here. So when you click on the queries, for example, I click on this query. Over here, exposed internet. This is the query. And I will hit search. After putting the query, I'll hit search. What it is doing, it is using Logic app in the backend. Now it has searched it quickly. It says there are two VMs. It says these are exposed to the internet, which is true. These VMs are exposed to the internet, that it basically does. So you can use a query builder or you can use a template also. That's it. Inventory basically shows you the inventory of all the services that you have. So it shows you that you have a total of 107 resources, which includes your resource group, virtual machines, storage accounts, uh, virtual networks, key vaults, any service that you provision. So it shows you all those 107 resources. So it's a good place where you can see all the resources. And from here, you can also add non-Azure servers. So this is also a good feature here. That's it. This is all about Defender for Cloud. There is not much. The more you work with it, the more you understand. But right now, the most important thing is to increase the secure score by looking at recommendations and trying to fix it. So if I go to PCI DSS lay, so if I click on PCI DSS, it shows me PCI DSS window, wherein I'll see the control which are specific to PCI DSS compliance and my score against it. So these are my controls. You can see PCI DSS selected. Now these are my controls. So I clicked on expand all compliances. Now I will see all 194 controls that it has in this list. And against each control, I can see how many of them are failing, how many of them are not analyzed, all that information you will see. And for wherever you will see a red, you will need to make sure to address it. Example, this is red. It says accounts with write permissions on Azure resources should be MFA enabled. So there are some identities or user accounts which have write permission on Azure resources. They should be MFA enabled. I can click on this and it will show me those accounts which have write permissions also. So I can click on accounts here and it will show me these accounts. So these are the two accounts which have write permissions. They've been given contributor or owner right actually. So I will need to make sure that they are MFA enabled. And how do I remediate it? It shows the process that you go to Azure AD manage security defaults, then you enable the security defaults, or you can enable per user MFA. So you can click on that specific user and enable the MFA for these two users because these users have write permissions on Azure. So that's the logic here that you need to understand. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes. Yes.
Great. All right, guys. I'll give you 10 minutes here. Go ahead and look for these. Go ahead and pick up any compliance that you are interested in. Out of these three compliance, pick up any compliance and see what are controls you are failing, and then try and resolve at least 2-3 controls. By looking at recommendations, remediation steps, try and resolve at least 2-3 controls. So navigate to failed controls and evaluate options to resolve, remediate them. This is what you need to do. So I'll give you 10 minutes and then we will resume the session. I'm stepping away from my system, so I'll be right back. All right, guys, I'm back. Any specific questions you may have with respect to the process that we typically follow in operations when we work with Microsoft Defender for Cloud as a service, and when we deal with intelligence that it brings on the table with respect to secure score, with respect to attack path analysis, with respect to uh, the various standards and compliances, with respect to the capability that is offers under workload protection platform suite, with respect to the other capabilities that you've seen in Defender, and you may probably have questions on it.
Raghuveer, for the some of the recommendations we can do bulk uh, remediations, or we can take actions in a bulk, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For
But
example, the one that I took, right? Like the I took one exam. I took one which is I created a deny policy that was a bulk remediation. So what will
yeah,
happen? All the storage accounts that will get provisioned, user will not be allowed to select public access on them. User will always have to select the other radio button, which is either restrict access to a specific virtual network or to a private endpoint.
correct, correct. But in terms of delegation, if I want to assign the activity to someone to be completed before this time, it is very transactional, right? One delegation at a time. Can I just select 10 recommendations and then delegate it to a person?
No, that won't be possible because the recommendations will be shown. See, understand, uh, when you go to the recommendations under secure score, you see recommendations here, right? So when you click on recommendations, you select one recommendation at a time, right? So these are all the recommendations.
Yeah.
You select one recommendation at a time. Now, when you select that recommendation, you will always have these options: take action, which is delegate, assign owner, and set due date. So see what is happening in our environment. It's a lab environment, but in a production environment, you would have security configured from day one. We are more in this training, we are more into reactive mode, wherein we first configured the services with with whatever comes to us with default configurations, which created a lot of security misconfigurations and hence multiple recommendations. But in a production environment, you will not have the same recommendation across multiple resources or one resource with multiple recommendations. It doesn't typically happen in production. That is why it doesn't allow you to have multiple recommendations assigned to one person. It's like one-to-one mapping. All you can do, for example, I'm saying if this would have been possible, you would have seen the option here. So you can just see, right? So right now it is not available. Probably what will happen, your point is right. What if I have the same recommendation across multiple resources? Can I have that recommendation assigned to one person? For example, this is a common recommendation. Storage account should prevent shared key access, right?
Yeah.
So anything which is common, for example, these recommendations, all network ports should be restricted on network security group associated to. This is a common recommendation for two VMs. So right now it is not there, but let's say you can also group by title recommendations. So now I'm recommending I'm putting the recommendations, grouping them by title. Now this is one recommendation that is affecting 5 resources. Okay, now I'll click on it. So I click on it. Now I can say exempt, I can say deny, right? Do I have delegation option here? No, I cannot delegate. If I want to delegate, then I will need to get into the specific recommendation. When I go to that, I'm saying I need to get into the specific recommendation, then only I can do the delegation. So over here, I don't have an option. I can exempt, I can myself exempt, which is the same process that I've explained, or I can deny.
Right. So that, yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like we have to go one by one and
Yeah.
perhaps assign it to the same person and,
Yeah, that's
and
how it
then
is as we
the
speak.
issue is multiple. If there are 10 delegations, 10 emails will be sent to him if he misses that. Like, and he'll get multiple emails also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you select the owner will also get, I'm saying the manager of that person will also get equal emails.
Correct. Yeah.
I'm saying it is not a separate email. It is the same email which will have manager in CC, carbon copy.
Correct. Yeah. Then can this also be exported so that we can offline check and then maybe follow up with the teams to fix it? Is there any way?
Yeah, absolutely. This is very much possible. So you can export all the recommendations that has been assigned to an owner. For example, PIM admin is one owner who is currently been assigned this recommendation. Right? Hope my screen is visible.
Yeah, no, prior to assignment means delegation, you're saying, right?
No, yeah, I'm showing you both. I'm
Yeah.
saying that you can do the download. For example, if you want to see as an admin, as an auditor, you want to see, okay, how many recommendations are currently pending resolution and who they are assigned to, right? So you can come to the screen and you can download a CSV report here. Then similarly, if you want to see all the recommendations, let's say I'll go to security posture once again, I'll click on view recommendations. So I see all the recommendations. I'll go to environment and I'll say view recommendations. Now these are all the recommendations that I have. This is the list of recommendations that I have, right? What I can do, I can download them into a CSV also from here. So I can hit download CSV and I can store it on my system. And then I can just open it. Probably you can call a meeting of your team members. You can open this CSV and you can talk about these recommendations. So it comes into CSV format also. And if you have a team, you can also add one column here, and you can assign. You can put the you can assign it to the people in the room itself while you are discussing it.
Okay. Yeah. That makes
Okay.
sense.
For example, across all the recommendations, there is one recommendation on the top which is assigned to PIM admin, and the completion status is on time because the deadline is for tomorrow. You can see here. So this is very much possible to download the recommendations. In fact, you can see the governance report also. You don't see it right now. Now, the other thing that I wanted to show you is, see, there are two things that you need to understand here when it comes to compliance and regulations. First, so compliance and regulation by CSP. Now, first thing is that as a customer, you are expected to comply to certain regulations and compliances with respect to your consumption in cloud. So if you deploy an application in cloud that has the capability to process payment information, you need to comply to PCI DSS. And if you are processing that payment information for your customers who are citizens of European Union, then you also need to adhere to GDPR. This is on the customer. But same service provider, when it comes to the service provider, which in this case is Microsoft Azure, service provider also needs to adhere to the same compliances because they also have an infrastructure. So if you want to get details about service provider adherence to the compliances, you want to know first thing whether my CSP adheres to a certain compliance. That's the first question that comes to your mind. Second, whether the service or services that I consume from cloud are in compliance to those standards and regulations. Right? These are the two things that you need to know basically, because this is very important. So the first question is whether my CSP adheres to a certain compliance. If I want to get that information, all I need to do, I'll need to go to the regulatory compliance blade. And over here, I have an option that says audit reports. So I can click on audit reports, and here I will see the audit reports of Microsoft for various compliances. So you can see the audit report here. You can search for a report. I want to see whether Microsoft Azure adheres to PCI DSS or not. And if yes, then when was the last time Microsoft Azure went through PCI DSS audit? So I have those reports here. You can see Microsoft Azure adherence to PCI DSS 3.1, 1.0. You see all the reports here. So this is the latest one. I can download this report. And once this report is downloaded, I can open this report. So this is the report. It has all the information. So it has the PCI DSS compliance for Azure Kubernetes Service, Azure Shared Service, and then you will have also the attestation certificates. So PCI DSS. So you can see PCI DSS has attestation of compliance for on-site assessment service provider. So PCI DSS sent their auditors to Azure, various Azure data centers on site, and they did this compliance. So from Azure side, Pradeep Nair was available. He's a vice president of Azure Global Infrastructure Services. That's his email. He's based out of Redmond, Washington. Then from the company, from the compliance, from the auditor perspective, Coalfire Systems, which is a vendor with PCI DSS, they were available. He's the compliance officer, which is Morgan Sire. So all this information is available, and then you will see a specific information about what was done, how that audit was performed, which services are complying, all that information you will see here. So this gives you a confidence. See, before you preach it to the customer and say that Azure is secure, you yourself should have confidence on Azure. And this is where the confidence comes. This is a documentary evidence. You can share it with the customer and say, sir, Azure is PCI certified, PCI DSS certified, Azure infrastructure, and for that I'll send you the official report. That's first thing. Then the second thing comes is, so this is how you see the compliance of Azure across multiple ISOs, US government, all the standards that which are there. For example, these are all ISOs compliances of Azure, all ISO related, right? This is SOC related compliances that Azure is. This is industry and regional compliances, which is other compliances, high trust compliances is there. So that's the first thing, which basically tells you whether my CSP adheres to a certain compliance. So it could be PSI, PCI, SOC, ISO, etc. That's the first thing that you need to know. The second thing is whether the service that I'm consuming from cloud is in compliance to those standards. Let's say I have built an application that has the capability to process payments, store credit debit card information of my customers, and that application is built in Microsoft Azure, built and hosted in Microsoft Azure, and it is using 5-6 services of Microsoft Azure, let's say. Now the question is whether those 5-6 services are in compliance with PCI DSS or not. What is the point of my application being compliant to PCI DSS when the underlying infrastructure or the services on which my application is hosted is not in compliance? That is equally important. So if you want to get that information, you will need to go to the compliance once again, and over here there is an option that says compliance offerings. So click on compliance offerings, and here you will get this information. Earlier, this information was available on Microsoft Trust Center website, but now Microsoft has made a change and make this information available under CSPM capability so that you can always get the information. So here you can see the service. Let's say I want to know compute service, or let's say virtual machine service, and I want to know virtual machine service adheres to how many compliances. So here's the virtual machine service. I can see that virtual machine adheres to these compliances. Does that include PCI DSS? Yes, PCI DSS is included.
So it's not my instance of virtual machine. It is the virtual machines service that Azure is offering to. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Your instance of virtual machine is your responsibility. For that,
Correct.
you will have, I'm saying, for that you are doing this part already. So for that, you've already configured this PCI DSS assessment, which is where this is exactly telling you that PCI DSS has a total of 206 controls, and these controls are put into this category. And then you will see that where exactly you're not adhering to it. For example, you're not adhering to this control. You can click on this and see what exactly I'm not adhering to. So over here, it says that it is failing across these two line items, and the service which is responsible or which it is failing against is a virtual machine, and then it's a storage account. And when you click on further, it will tell you exactly which virtual machine is failing. So you can see all 7 virtual machines are failing this compliance, this specific control in PCI DSS compliance. And now it is your responsibility to fix it. And what Azure is telling you, that I'm also in compliance. Azure is telling you that my virtual machine and storage account, for example, I want to check if storage account service of Azure, which is here, is in compliance with PCI DSS. Yes, it is in compliance. You can see here. Whether virtual machine is in compliance, yes, virtual machine service is in compliance. I can see this row. It is compliance. So so my service provider services are in compliance, but the instance of those services that I have provisioned to host my application is not in compliance, which means I am at fault. If the audit happens, I will be penalized. Or if there is any data leakage that happens, and if the regulatory agency is made aware of it, or if the enforcement agencies comes to know that there is a business who is storing credit debit card information of customers from India, but not in compliance with PCI DSS, RBI, enforcement team will come to your place and will close your business. They will close your business with immediate effect. They'll take necessary actions. This is exactly what has happened with Paytm in India. Paytm was not in compliance with certain standards with respect to data management, data residency, data localization, with respect to processes of the government of India, or the compliance or the controls which are laid down by Reserve Bank of India. Paytm was not in compliance with it, and that's where they decided to close the Paytm services. Today, they have closed Paytm payment bank offerings completely. They've put it on it is currently being suspended. And Paytm is trying to get that that uplifted, that suspension uplifted, and they are doing everything possible to ensure that they are in compliance. They modify their services, their processes, their technologies, their people, and they come, they're covered under compliance so that they can request the appropriate enforcement agency to review it once again and give them a clear check. So that's how it happens. And why this is important for you? This is important for you because you are part of SOC team. You probably don't manage the compliance responsibilities. There's a separate governance team who is responsible, but you guys are collaborating, or you are enabler for it. You will help them to enable and control it effectively, even if they are not directly communicating with you. But even though you are a critical role in that process. That is why you need to be aware of all this. Only working with a solution is not sufficient. Understanding the solution's capability and limitation is equally important. What if you have been working with Microsoft Azure Defender for Cloud for a long time, and today you only got this information? Then definitely there was a gap in your knowledge. That this training gave you an opportunity to fill that. Am I making sense, guys?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. So this was the other thing that you need to be aware of, which is the compliance part, not for the services that you manage, but for the service providers infrastructure also. Right. So this is another thing. So I'm just talking about important and critical things that you need to be aware from when it comes to a specific service. So right now the focus is on Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So I'm just trying to cover everything that you should be aware of that is equally important and that needs to go as a deliverable as part of this training. That's what I'm doing right. So I believe that is all I'm saying. I'll just see if there is anything which is left. I'm also open to questions, guys. Sometimes what happens, the more questions you ask, the more input you give, and you also encourage trainer to share things, things which are important, or anything that I may skip, you typically remind me to cover it. So anything that you feel that you still have doubt, or you always wanted to understand from Defender for Cloud perspective, or from CSPM and CWPP perspective, this is your opportunity to ask question. Otherwise, I'll consider this topic as closed and completed today.
So I have one question.
Yeah,
So
please go ahead.
I checked the compliance controls and I found one. Well, I'm sharing my screen.
Sure, give me a moment. Yes, Kunal.
So as you can see here, so I found this one. So your account should restrict network usage using virtual network. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I checked the recommendation
Hmm.
and I did the changes here.
Hmm.
But from last 10 to 15 minutes, it is showing this, and it has not been enabled yet. So how much time does it take? And generally, how much time does it take to enable any kind of rule?
See, enablement is quick. Impact and effect of it takes time. For example, it will be enabled quickly the next moment, but the recommendation will refresh based on its refresh time. Now, if you notice carefully, the refresh time of the recommendation is 30 minutes. This is what Microsoft says, but don't go by what you see on the screen. Sometimes it happens in less than 30 minutes. Sometimes it takes more than 30 minutes. So what, as a security professional, when it comes to Microsoft, I recommend to my customers that whenever you make any changes, try to do those changes during the end of the business hours, so that those changes will not affect your business, and let them replicate overnight, and subsequent morning when you resume work, look for the impact of that change, effectiveness of that change. And if it is not happening, then only you should raise a support request with Microsoft. But don't just expect it to be done the very next moment, the very next hour, and then if it is not happening, you feel bad, and you start to troubleshoot thinking that there is something wrong with your configuration. That's not how it happens. Right?
Yes, yes. So as you can see, I am getting this notification waiting for the networks to finish updating and respond to enabling service endpoints for Microsoft Storage/Storage Global.
That's okay. Just close that for a moment.
If I try to close it, it will give us that your unsaid edit should
That's
be
okay.
discarded.
That's okay. Click on close.
Okay.
Okay. Now, all right. Now let's fix it. So the reason what is happening, you've not selected your network. That's the reason it's not working. See, it says enable from. So first select your network.
No,
Select
I
your virtual
selected
network.
it.
That's okay. I want to see it once again. Okay, so you've selected. Why are you selecting 3 networks? You can only have your storage account contained in one network.
No, basically all of these are made by me only. So I'm like
No, that is
selecting.
okay. But
Oh,
how can you have a storage account contained in multiple networks? It will only be contained in one network. Right? So you need to understand, see, this is a view. If view gives you 10 options, it doesn't mean you need to take 10 options.
No, not always I will do this, but
No, I'm
this
saying
is a
just select
training
one
session.
option. I want to see whether it is working or not. So select
Okay.
one of the virtual network where you want to contain the storage account. Right? Now select the subnet from that virtual network where you want the storage account to reside. Great. Now select, click enable. Click enable. Now what it says that storage, so the reason why it is not happening, because that subnet that you've selected doesn't have private endpoint service enabled for it. That is the reason it was not happening. So you need to understand the process, that you need to first create a private private endpoint for that subnet, then only it will work. Otherwise it will keep coming like this. But if you do the other thing, which is disabled, the other thing is I want to disable the public network. You can close that. Now click on disabled. Let's say you don't want public access at all, right? Now click on disabled and save it. This will work in effectively. It will work with the next moment. See, it is saving the rule and it is done. Now access to your storage account is disabled. You yourself will not be able to access. Now go to the container of the storage account and see you will not be able to access. It will say that access is not available. Yeah, go to the container under data management. No, not here. The container, or go up. The storage account should data storage. Sorry, data storage. Data storage.
Data storage. Okay. Continue.
Here you see containers where you upload data. Yes. See, click on the container name, test container, and you will get the error. Why? Because you've disabled the access to your storage account. So it is immediate. Now, in this case also, your recommendation will satisfy because your recommendation was around storage account being exposed to public network. Now you've just disabled that access. So within next 30 minutes or probably some additional minutes, that recommendation will go green and you will get the appropriate score against that recommendation.
Here, okay. Okay. Yes, understood. Yes.
Got the message?
Yes. Okay. Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question, guys?
Raghu, I also seen the capability of integrating with the Defender for Cloud with ServiceNow. So that capability will convert that all these recommendations to ServiceNow ticket, right?
No, it's not that all these recommendations will flow into ServiceNow. That's not what it is. It's a new capability that they added. As part of that capability, see, ServiceNow is your ITSM solution using which you can manage your day-to-day support operations with respect to incident and change management, let's say. So when you enable this capability, when you say that you want to enable the capability, what basically happens, let's say I select ServiceNow. So first I will need to create a ServiceNow integration. Once that integration is done, then you will, so typically what will happen, ServiceNow, so I've done that ServiceNow work in the past, integration part. So ServiceNow has its own directory wherein you can create all your users accounts in ServiceNow, or you can integrate your AD with ServiceNow, so that ServiceNow will have your user information. So what will happen when you have this completed, you can do the assignment by selecting the user, and you can also select, because this will go as an incident in ServiceNow. You can select the priority and severity of this incident also, and the incident will get assigned to the user. So then the ServiceNow workflow will work, wherein user will get the notification, and if user is logged into the ServiceNow, user will go to my incidents or my request, and user will be able to see that incident, and user can resolve it. And since there is an integration, the moment user resolves it, the recommendation will automatically go green in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Portal. This is what integration is all about.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. And so Microsoft also has, Microsoft has also it in, the other day I was attending a webinar on Microsoft Defender for Cloud, our latest capabilities, at the beginning of this month itself. So what basically happened, what Microsoft announced, that they also have this in pipeline, that they will also integrate Defender for Cloud with Jira and BMC Remedy, which are another two leading ITSM solutions. Right?
Okay.
Great. Any other question from participants?
Yes, yes.
Great, let's get started. I'll share my screen. Hope the screen is visible to everyone.
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's move on. So we are done with Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Let's move to Microsoft Sentinel now. And we are going to configure custom analytics rule. We did configure default analytics rule, wherein Microsoft Sentinel itself provides you a lot of capabilities, a lot of intelligence that can be leveraged based on case-to-case basis, based on customers' requirement. Not all customers require everything. The requirements are different depending on the industry vertical that they belong to, which basically means a bank and a manufacturing firm. They may not have similar security requirements. Their security requirements may differ. But when it comes to Microsoft Sentinel as a SIEM and SOAR solution, it caters to approximate all industry verticals. And it has something for everyone. That's what Microsoft Sentinel is all about. So yesterday, when I went through the Sentinel, when I was covering the Sentinel part, I basically showed you a couple of capabilities of Sentinel. Let's start and understand some additional capabilities of Sentinel. So I'll navigate to Sentinel. Hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now let's configure a capability of Sentinel that we will configure today, and probably we'll get to see some intelligence coming out from that capability by tomorrow when we have this configuration up and running overnight. So Microsoft Sentinel, and from Microsoft Sentinel, the one configuration of Microsoft Sentinel is UEBA, which stands for User Entity and Behavior Analytics. User Entity and Behavior Analytics. Now, what this capability does, let me explain that from my Sentinel presentation. Is the presentation visible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what this capability does, this capability in Azure Sentinel, it basically identifies threats inside your organization and potential impact when a compromised entity basically means any device, any identity, or a malicious insider who is your user, and delivers high fidelity actionable intelligence so that we can focus on investigation and remediation. The typical example of it is that what UEBA does, it integrates with Microsoft Entra ID, it integrates with Microsoft Sentinel, it integrates with other security products of Microsoft, and it creates a pattern of user behavior. So let's say there are users in the organization. Those users are responsible for taking care of certain roles and responsibilities. Let's say a SOC team. SOC team has multiple users at different levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, probably a subject matter expert, then or let's say a team lead, a manager, a director, engagement manager. There are multiple hierarchies of users. They all are users for UEBA. What it does, it creates a pattern of their actions in terms of which applications and websites they are browsing, at what time they are browsing, from which browser they are browsing, what is their typical browsing pattern. It creates a pattern, and based on that pattern, it will create certain intelligence, and whenever it finds a deviation from that pattern, this behavior, this UEBA capability will alert you. So for example, if there is an incident, and in that incident, if you find a user, an identity, the UEBA will tell you whether that identity has been involved in additional instances. It provides you that level of information. So as Sentinel collects logs and alert from all of its connected data source, UEBA analyzes them and builds baseline behaviors. This baseline behavior profiles are known as patterns, and it creates a pattern for users, host, IP addresses, and applications. Let's say yesterday I created an IOC to block anydesk.exe. Now anydesk.exe is blocked on one of the endpoint, and it resulted in an incident. You start working on the incident. Now with the help of UEBA, you will quickly identify that the similar application, if present on other systems or not, and if yes, then how many times this application was used by whom, using which IP address in the past. And it will show you a pattern of the last 6 months. That gives you a lot of intelligence in terms of whether you really want to block it, or you will just want to put that into monitoring mode because there's a heavy utilization of this service or application. So that's what UEBA does. Using a variety of techniques and machine learning capabilities, Azure Sentinel UEBA can then identify anonymous activity and help us in determining if an asset has been compromised. Now, UEBA is tightly integrated with conditional access. So whenever UEBA identifies a change in pattern, a difference in pattern, it will also trigger risk-based conditional access, a feature that I talked about when I was covering Microsoft Entra ID, when we did a demo of conditional access also. So it can quickly identify the risk in the behavior. So this is how it works. UEBA takes user data from Azure Active Directory, which is now Microsoft Entra ID, and combined with logs and alerts from connected data source. So it will pick up the user data from AD, and then the logs that it receives from various data sources, it will create a pattern. It builds baseline behavioral profiles for entities like Azure AD users, host IP addresses, and applications. So this is how it is doing. So the customer data is flowing into Azure Sentinel, which has a UEBA engine. That engine is creating behavioral analytics from the log analytics as well as from Entra ID. And then this information is served to effective solution. Give me a moment. Okay, great. So let's go back to the presentation. You've seen how this technology basically works. This technology feeds on the user information from Microsoft Entra ID, and then the behavior analytics that it does for various log sources that it connects, and then it tries to connect the user with those log sources and provides you information. So it says once user information is synced from Azure AD, and in order to start profiling user activities, we need to select which data source will be profiled. It supports data sources. So that's what it does. So let's directly go to these settings where we enable it basically. So in Microsoft Sentinel, I would request all of you to log into Microsoft portal and be on this page, which is on Microsoft Sentinel dashboard. And let me know when you are there so that I'll tell you where exactly we need to configure it. Is everyone on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, great. So on the screen, I'm saying in order to enable UEBA, you need to get to the bottom of it where it says settings. So get to the bottom of it where it says settings. In these settings, you will find UEBA option. So when you come to the settings, the first option is about pricing. Then you go to the next, which is settings. Here you see this entity behavior analytics. This is where UEBA is. So this is where you need to click on set UEBA. Obviously, it involves a cost, but since we are using a trial version, there is no cost involved here. Everything goes into the trial. So we'll click on set UEBA. And in the UEBA, you will configure all of this. So what it will show you, it will first, so it says turn on UEBA, which you must complete step 2 for UEBA functionality to start. So first step, only global admin and security admin in your Microsoft Entra ID can turn this on or off. Since you already are, I'm saying all of us are global admin, we can turn this off and on. So it is on. So if it is not on, just turn it on. Then it says that from where exactly you want the entity's data to sync. Now you have two options, Microsoft Entra ID and Active Directory. So you need to select both the options because earlier you would only have one option, which Microsoft Entra ID. But now it says Active Directory also. So which basically means that it can also synchronize identities from Active Directory, right? So it says select Microsoft Sentinel at least one of the following directory service. Then comes select the existing data source you want to enable for entity behavior analytics. Now over here, you will see these data sources that you want to enable. So I always go with all because I want this activity because majority of the activities will come from Azure activity logs, which is related to user activity on Azure portal. But at the same time, the security events will talk about user activities from virtual machine perspective, because in our data collection rule, we have enabled to collect all security logs, right? All critical error warning. These sign-in logs are coming from Entra ID. So this sign-in logs and audit logs are coming from Entra ID. This is coming from virtual machines, which is the data collection rule. And this is coming from Azure activity log. So I always go with all the logs so that to have a comprehensive UEBA capability, you will hit apply. And now UEBA is turned on. It says data source update was successful. Obviously, since you've turned it on right now, it will not work with immediate effect. It will start to create a pattern based on what activities you will do. So the reason I have turned UEBA before creating any custom rule, so that after we create the custom rule, we'll try to simulate the attack. And then with that attack, the UEBA will trigger and it will try to create a pattern and try to see whether the same user or the same IP address or the same device was involved in previous attacks, or was it involved in previous or in other incidents, and then it will try to create a pattern. Then comes anomalies. Now over here, we've already, we have already enabled anomalies. What it basically does, it provides a rich set of behavior analytics to determine anomalies activities in your environment. So you've already selected it. Then workspace manager configuration. Now workspace manager, now this is not related to UEBA. UEBA is only entity behavior analytics and anomalies. This is a separate setting altogether. What this setting is, it says that Microsoft Sentinel's workspace manager enables user to centrally manage multiple workspaces within one or more Microsoft Azure tenants. So as I said, there could be the workspace design architecture that I talked about yesterday, wherein imagine your company being a multinational serving clients and customers across multiple geographies. In that case, you will have to manage multiple standards and compliances, which means you cannot go with one workspace. You cannot dump everything into one workspace. I'm saying you will not be able to decide the location for it. What if I create my workspace in India and ingest data from North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, Africa? Then it is not possible, because if you bring everything into India, you're violating a lot of compliance. What if you create workspace in Europe and you're bringing data from everywhere to Europe? It would involve a lot of cost, data, the egress cost. B, you would have unnecessarily data in a region which is not needed. So in that case, you will go with multiple workspaces, probably one workspace in each region. And And to separate the production and non-production data, you will also create two separate workspaces, one production, one non-production. So your design will contain a minimum of 2 workspaces in each region, and you will end up having at least 10 to 15 workspaces. So how do you manage them all? That is where the service is workspace manager, which will enable you to enable you to create a central workspace. It says make this workspace a central workspace. So any workspace, you can go inside and make it a central workspace, and rest of the workspace will be managed from this workspace. That's the concept. So when this becomes a central workspace, you can go to workspace manager, which is a separate view. Here it will list all the workspace which are part of it, which are ingesting logs into Sentinel, and you will be able to manage those workspace from this centralized window. So it's like a centralized dashboard wherein you see all the workspace, and you can get a quick a quick information about other workspaces from here. So this is a new capability that Sentinel added last year only for customers who has multiple workspaces. Are you with me on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So workspace manager configuration. So we did this. Then comes some additional settings which are there, which is playbook permissions. You can enable playbook permissions, which basically means the automation playbooks that you will create, who will have permissions to those playbook. So these are the users right now, groups right now that you have. You can create, you can go to any of the resource group, and you can give it permissions to the playbook. So since we don't have any playbook, we'll just leave it as it is. Then how do we use your data? This is where Sentinel is asking, can we use your data for some analytics, some marketing, some additional purposes? You will turn it off. No, we don't. So typically customers will say that we don't want our data to be used for, for your stuff. We don't want you to experiment on our data. Then auditing and health monitoring, which is also enabled. Auditing and health monitoring feature will give you an availability and health of your system resources, basically Sentinel. So you can enable this feature. The feature is enabled, and then in the end, remove Microsoft Sentinel. Let's say before the end of the trial period, you decide to remove everything. You decide to remove all the configurations that you've done in the Sentinel. You will just come to this setting, which is remove Microsoft Sentinel, and you will select the region. Why are you removing it? Probably you're moving to another workspace. So this remove Microsoft Sentinel doesn't mean that you're deleting Sentinel. You never created Sentinel that you can delete. Sentinel is a service that is enabled on a workspace. So when you say remove Microsoft Sentinel, it basically means that you're removing the workspace from the Sentinel, so that Sentinel will not do its job from this moment onward. So that is where it says moving to another workspace. I'm removing this workspace because I will be using another workspace, or it has some missing features, or probably Sentinel is too expensive, or any other reason. So you will select the reason. You will select this box if you wish, whether Microsoft can send you an email, and you can say remove Microsoft Sentinel from your workspace. It says after the disconnection is identified, the offboarding process begins, and then the connector specific offboarding will be removed. You must manually delete your playbook and everything within 30 days. After 30 days, we will remove everything. It says we will remove everything after 30 days. And within 48 hours, the data and rules that you have configured will stop working. Why it says 48 hours? Because your analytics rule has a schedule. Probably you have created some rules to run once in a day, or twice a day, or probably once in a week. So within 48 hours, all your rules will be suspended. They will not be accessible, and they will not return any, they will not run any query, return any result that will result in incident or event creation. That's the setting part, which you all need to be aware of. Any questions so far?
Raghu, for enabling UVBA, we need a MDI to be configured, because when I'm enabling, I'm getting an error that need MDI like yeah.
Temporary.
Give me a moment. So yeah, please share your screen. Let me see.
Yeah, I'm sharing. Let's see.
Give me a moment.
Yeah, if we remove the I2 data and I apply.
I'm just looking for your screen. Give me a moment. I'll see it actually. Yeah, now I want to see it. What it says? Which one?
This settings requires MD.
No, just remove Active Directory from there. You don't need Active Directory.
Okay.
Now scroll it down. Which setting requires this is apply. Now select all of them and apply.
Yeah.
See,
Now
it is
it's yeah.
So I'll tell you. See, understand this thing. See, at the end of the day, this is business for Microsoft. Microsoft has a separate service in the name Microsoft Defender for Identity. Now, UEBA picks data from Microsoft Entra ID. Microsoft Entra ID is protected using Microsoft Defender for Identity. So what Microsoft is trying to tell you that let's use a comprehensive security. Let's enable Microsoft Defender for Identity also so that we can provide you all-round security. That's what Microsoft was trying to say. So they were just trying to push another product that you can purchase. But coincidentally, we already have that product with us. Our license includes that product that we will also configure. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So this was all these settings. Hope my screen is visible.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Next is workspace settings. Now, when you click on workspace settings, it directly takes you to the workspace that you are currently using and workspace related solutions. So there is nothing that we need to do in the workspace because we are using this workspace for Sentinel. So anything that we need to configure, we'll configure in the Sentinel. We can't even configure usage and cost for this workspace because this is enabled with Sentinel. So automatically the current payment plan that you are using in this workspace is Sentinel pricing tier, which is pay as you go. So there is nothing that you configure here. However, you can use the workbook, which is there in the workspace, and that workbook will give you certain data about this workspace usage. But I would rather suggest you to use the other workbook that we have enabled yesterday that gives you more information, the standalone workbook that gives you all of this information plus some additional information that you need, this workspace usage. So this workbook doesn't give you much data, or whatever data you see here with this workspace usage workbook, the same data plus a lot of additional data is already available with the other workbook that we enabled yesterday. So we'll go to workbook over here, and here we'll click on my workbook, which is here, my workspace usage report. Just click on this workbook and view this workbook. You will get more data here. This is a standalone workbook that we deployed or that we installed yesterday. Right now you can select the workspace and you see a lot of data, the same data that you were seeing there, plus some additional data also, which is coming here. All the information, a detailed information that you can view here in this workspace. And workspace details, you will also see all of this. So you have a lot of data that comes here. So always, as far as it is related to a workspace that is connected to Sentinel, I would rather suggest you to use this workbook, workspace usage report workbook, which is very important. Okay, so this is what these settings are. Now we'll go back to Microsoft Sentinel and we will create custom analytics role. So by now you can see a lot of information is coming in Sentinel. I've got a new incident generated. I can see my data received, how much data is coming. I can see my data connectors. There is no unhealthy data connector. All data connectors are healthy. They are active. I can see, threat intelligence by type. Nothing is there because I'm not doing anything on the machines. There are 6 analytics rules. They all are enabled. No analytics rule is disabled or auto disabled. So I see some bird eye view here. Any automation which is there, you will find here, right? So this is the information that you get on the portal. Let's go ahead and configure the custom analytics rule. So the first custom analytics rule that I'm going to configure is on the Azure portal brute force attack. So the first rule that I'm going to configure is custom analytics rules. And the first rule that I'm going to configure is Azure portal brute force attack. So whenever there is a brute force attack on Azure portal, the rule will quickly identify it, will create an incident in Azure portal. Is everyone ready? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we will do, we will go to analytics. Over here, you see an option analytics under configuration. And in the analytics, we will hit create, and we will click on scheduled query rule. This is what we will do. Scheduled query rule we will create. Now I'll share the query with you guys. You just need to put this query in the rule. So I'll put the query into the chat box. Here's the query. I put the query in the chat box. Now let's create a rule. You need to put the same query there in the rule. Is my screen visible? Did you all copy the query?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's create a rule now. So the first thing that we do, we'll put a name of the rule. Analytics rule details. So we'll put the name, which is, I'll say Azure portal brute force attack. Next, I'll put a description. I'll just copy the same and I'll say description. And I'll say this rule will create incident when there is a brute force attack triggered on Azure portal. So this rule will create incident when there's a brute force attack triggered on Azure portal. Next, we'll select the severity of the severity of this rule or the severity of the incident that gets generated. Obviously, the brute force attack, I would consider it a high severity incident. Then you will need to select the tactic. Tactic basically means that so there are tactics which are available. So you need to select the tactic, that what the tactic is. So I'll say this is related to initial access. Somebody is trying to get initial access on the portal. So I'll select the tactic also. Is everyone with me so far? And when you create the rule, you can keep that rule disabled also. I'm saying create a rule today and probably enable it at a later point in time. But we'll enable it today itself, so we'll keep it enabled. Then comes rule logic. Now this is the main screen. This is where the entire effort will happen, and this will ensure the efficiency of your rule. So the first thing that you need to do here is paste the query. The query that you have copied from the chat, paste the query here. So I'll paste the query.
Hello, Raghuveer. We are actually
Yes.
lagging behind. So can you just start from the general again?
From where?
General. From the first step.
General. So the first step, we didn't do much. I'm saying we just created, we just put the name, description, we selected the severity, and we selected the attack framework, the attack tactics as initial access. And the by default rule is enabled.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll go to the next, which is set rule logic. There you will put the rule query. Now you cannot, you cannot test with current data because you are just creating this rule and you have not simulated any attack on Azure portal. So you will not get any data here. However, if I click on test with current data, I will get some data here. I will get the result of this rule actually. But in your case, if you test it with current data, you will not get any information. So it is testing it with the current data. It is trying to bring some data. So you can see I've got the data. I've got a lot of attacks which has happened on, but you will not get it. Next is very important, which is entity mapping. You will need to do the entity mapping. Entity mapping basically means you can map up to 10 entities. It basically means that when the query will provide a result, what information you want to capture, what all information you want to capture in the result. So in the brute force attack, definitely I want to capture the IP address, the location, the user name, and the user principal name. So what I will do, I will click on add new entity here. Under entity mapping, I'll click on add new entity. And I will add the entity here. So what entities I will add to get the information? The first entity that I will add is account. That with which account this is related to. So you will see all the entities here that you can add here. So I'll click on account. That's the first entity. And in the account, I want to get the name of the user who is triggering this attack. So I'll select name. And obviously, Microsoft Entra ID doesn't understand name. So what Microsoft Entra ID understands is UPI. So I will click on ID. So it will basically pick up the name, and that is the ID field. Right? That's the first thing that I want to capture. Then I will click on add new entity once again, and I will say I also want to capture the IP address from where this attack is getting triggered. So in the IP address field, once again, I will select address, and in the address I want to capture the IPs. So I've captured the IP address also. Then similarly, I will once again say add new entity, which is I want to capture IP once again, because see, I don't have a location option here. Don't have a location. So I'll say IP, and with that IP, it will try to identify the location. So with the IP address, it will try to resolve that what could be the location. So I'll select location also. So this is the information that I'm trying to capture in my incident, that please go ahead and capture the username, please capture the IP address, please capture the location. Then I'll click on once again, and I'll some additional information. Now, obviously, there is no point of capturing file hash malware because this is not happening. Then the other thing that I want to capture is host name. I want to capture the system also if some host related information can come. So host information. So I'll say over host information, I will have an option here wherein this is what I can capture. So I will say, please capture the host name. And with the host name, please capture the identity also. So I'll select identity here. So these are the things that I want to capture. You can also think of some additional entity that you would like to capture, but these are the typical things that you would like to capture in a brute force attack. So it is configured on my screen. You can see under account, I'm capturing the ID. Under IP, I'm capturing the address as IP. Then once again, I'm capturing the address as location. And under host, I'm capturing the host name with identity. Are you done? Is everyone with me on this?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Next is scheduling. So we have provided the entity. Now we want to schedule this. So just leave that part, custom details and other details, directly come to scheduling. Now you want to schedule this alert, right? So you can say, because I want you to simulate the alert also after this rule is created. So I will say that please run this rule every 5 minutes and I want it to look up the data for the last 1 hour. So run every 5 minutes and look up data for last 1 hour. Obviously, this is not the right configuration, but since I want to simulate and get the immediate results, I will have it like this. Otherwise, you will always have run 5 minutes and last 5 minutes of data. Then comes start running automatically. Yes, it should start running automatically. Should not happen that I can also select a time that it should run on this time only. No, it will start running automatically. Then alert threshold, when it should generate an alert. So I'll say that generate an alert as soon as the query result is more than 0. I'm saying even if it fetches 1 result, generate an alert. So it will generate an alert. Now these settings will differ from one analytics rule to another analytics rule depending on the criticality of it. But when it comes to a brute force attack, I want, even if there is 1 attempt of brute force, I want to be notified. So I'm saying greater than 0. Then it says event grouping. Group all events into a single alert. So because of this, you can reduce the alert noise. So all events will be resulted into a single alert. Then it says stop running query after alert is generated. No, if you turn it on, then it will generate 1 alert that will result into an incident. And after that, it will stop running the query until you resolve that alert. So with this type of rule, wherein you want to notify on brute force attack, obviously you want yourself to be notified every time the attack triggers. So we'll keep it off. Are you with me on this?
Yes, sir.
Next. Then comes next, which is incident. Now, so what are we doing? We are grouping all the events into a single alert and we are creating incidents from alerts triggered by this rule. So whenever there is an alert, it will create incidents. If you turn this setting off, then only it will generate the alerts, but it will not create the incidents. Then what is the point of doing this exercise? So I will say yes. Then it says alert grouping. So we'll keep it disabled. Otherwise, what it will do, it will also create grouping of incidents. So I just want to see my incidents separately. That is why I'm keeping it disabled. Then comes next, which is automated response. We are not putting any automated response right now. We will probably put it tomorrow. First, we want to understand the analytics rule and the simulation part. Then I will talk about the automation. Automation means if the alert is getting triggered by an identity that belongs to my organization, it means that the identity is compromised. I will quickly go ahead and delete that identity. Now, deleting is not the right thing. I would probably want to disable that user so that no further attempt will be made from that identity. So that is something that I will show you tomorrow. Right now, just leave it blank and click on review plus create. So after you click on review plus create, it will do the validation and then in the end, you need to click on save. Now I will not save it because I already have this analytics rule created in my Sentinel instance, but you all need to click on save. So click on save and then understand what this rule is doing. So what this rule is doing, it is basically generating an incident whenever there is a failed logon attempt from a user from two different locations. And that is what qualifies for a brute force attack. And to have the attack generated, what I'm doing, I'm selecting the IPs as greater than 1, location as greater than 1. So what I'm saying that whenever there is an event ID generated with this code 50.126 or 50053, which means logon failure or after multiple failure, there's a successful logon. I will also consider this as a brute force attack. Then also the condition is that it should happen from more than one IP from more than one location. I'm just putting this. I'm saying if I remove this, then it will just based on this event ID, it will generate the alert. But I don't want to generate false alerts. So I'm saying that I will consider an attack as a brute force attack when it happens from multiple locations, multiple IP addresses, and I'm putting it more than one, so that at least I can simulate this attack quickly. So this is my logic that I've done. So you just save this information. And after that, what I want you to do, I want you to simulate the attack. So Azure Portal brute force attack,
Hello.
You will configure.
Hello.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm receiving
Yes.
the error while reviewing here.
Give me a moment. Simulate the attack. What error are you receiving? I'll stop sharing. Please share your screen. All right. Can I have the results? Were you able to configure it?
Yes, Raghuveer, it's working for me. Sagar here.
Sagar, did you get the incident?
Not the incident, but I can see the logs after
Okay.
running the query.
Would you mind sharing your screen and show it to the
Yeah,
rest of the
actually-
participants?
Sure.
You are
What I did first, I accessed the portal with on my mobile,
okay.
and
Which is from
later
India.
later I installed a third-party VPN on my phone and connected to one of the server, and then again access the portal. So just
And
I
that
shared my
server
screen.
is outside of India.
Correct. I have selected the US one, so it shows two locations now. One is India and one is US.
Okay, one is India, one is US. Great. Now let's go to your analytics rule. So your analytics rule is scheduled to run every 5 minutes, right? So let's
Yes,
go to
right.
incidents. Probably there is an incident already by now in the portal. Click on
Let me
incidents.
check. Yeah. As of now, nothing.
No, but I don't see it. I only see the rule right now.
Hmm.
Yeah, no incident. Okay. Now, so the default behavior is that the rule is supposed to run every 5 minutes. So probably next 5 minutes when the rule runs, it will find these two logs. And since these are two failure logs from the same ID, but from two different locations, and that qualifies the query to generate an incident stating that it's a brute force attack. So you use the same account, right?
Yeah, it's generated now. Just I refresh.
Okay, I
It's
don't see
showing
it.
here now.
Yeah, it's generated, right? So which means that your analytics rule is working fine. It is actually generating the incidents. Now, what happens from this moment onward is you already know that these incidents will be picked up by level 1 engineers who will do the initial triage. If they can resolve it, well and good. Otherwise, they will just assign it to. So first, this incident will be assigned. So typically in every company, you have a level 1 engineer or level 0 whose job is to keep an eye on the screen for incidents, and whenever there is an incident, assign it to appropriate team or member. So they will assign the incidents. Now, if you have integration with ServiceNow, these incidents will go to ServiceNow in the form of incidents, or you can manage the entire end-to-end incident management process here itself, right?
Right. Yes.
Great. This is something that I've already given you a demo in the previous session. Great. So we are good.
Yeah.
It is generating the incident. Automation is something that we will do tomorrow, which is we will disable this user to further, generate any brute force attack or simulate any brute force attack. Great. So we are good with the first one. We'll move on to the next one, which is, I'll share my screen now. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Raghu.
Okay. So we have created this custom analytics rule, and we have simulated the attack. Next is another rule that I will create, another analytics rule that I will create, and then I will simulate the attack. Give me a moment. The other rule is attempt to sign in to disable accounts. Or not this one, probably let's take another one, because attempt to sign in to disable account is a default rule. We want to create one more rule here. So I'll share that rule query. So my other rule that I want to build is on network security group. We all have seen network security group service, and we know how critical that service is. You all know that using network security groups, I can actually control traffic that comes in and goes out of my VM. Let's assume for a moment, I have a virtual machine that is hosting a critical database for my company, critical database. And that database is actually hosting critical or classified information of my business. What if somebody, and that database is configured, so I've configured the database to only accept traffic on port 1433 from my web server. But there is a hacker, there is an insider who basically changes or manipulates the inbound rule and changes the port from 1433 to any other port. Or that person deletes that inbound port and create another rule, another inbound rule to have that database accessible on port 1433 from internet, so that hacker can access it, which is known as modification of NSG, which is one of the critical activity that you must monitor in a production environment. So the next analytics rule that we are going to create is on network security group modification, especially for production VMs. But you can, I'm saying it for production because that's what you want to monitor. Why would you be worried about non-production environment? But you can create it for non-production also. So the rule is network security group modify for production VM. Now I'll share the query for this rule in the chat window. So I've shared the query for this rule in the chat window. We all will go ahead and configure this rule now. So let's go ahead and configure this rule. So we'll click on once again, create schedule query rule. I'll say the rule name as a critical, or I will say production NSG is modified. This is the name. You can put any name. This rule will analyze modification in on network security group service and return an incident whenever an NSG is modified. Modified means both deleted or any rule is created or any inbound and outbound rule is modified or deleted or recreated. Right? Severity, I would say medium. Then I'll select the attack, which is, I would say, privilege escalation. This has escalated the privilege. And I would say, so you can put any exfiltration because this could be done for the purpose of stealing the data, and it is also lateral movement so that you gain access to one VM and then from there you can move laterally to other VM. So these are the appropriate tactics that you can select for this one. We've selected the tactics, then we'll go to rule logic, and here we will put the query. So we'll put the query here. And then we'll go to entity mapping and we'll put the entities. So the first entity, once again, we'll select as account. In the account, we want to capture the information. So we'll say name and we'll capture this information which is there, time generated, caller IP address, caller. So we'll capture the caller, that who did that in the name field. Then we'll keep another activity which is host. Which host is impacted? I'm saying the NSG was associated to some host. So which host is going to get impacted? Here we'll select host name and we'll try to capture the resource ID, the ID of that host. Then next, so this is what we can do. We want to capture the IP address also. So we'll say address and we'll capture the caller IP address, from which IP address this activity is happening, right? So this is what we will capture. What else we can capture here? Let's say host we have captured, account we have captured, IP you have captured. That's it. I'm saying you just need these three pieces of information. So we'll just capture these three entities. We'll configure these three entities. Then query the same. Let's run it for every 5 minutes and look for data of the last 1 hour. Yes, the rule will start automatically. It will generate results when it finds any information. Even once it finds it, it will generate a result, and it will group all events into a single alert. It will not suppress anything. In the incident settings, yes, I want an incident to be generated as soon as an event is generated from this rule. Right now, I'm not putting any automation. Automation I'll put tomorrow, probably as soon as this happens. I would like that NSG to go back to its original position, and an email should be sent to the admin with immediate effect so that they can take appropriate action. So that we will do tomorrow. I will click on review plus create and I'll validate. It is validating it. Validation passed. I'll create the review. So this is another rule that I have created. Now, guys, understand the objective. The objective is to introduce the service and help you understand the UI of it and various capabilities that it brings on the table. Now, whether you create 2 rules or 200 rules, the UI will remain the same, which basically means for each rule, you will provide the rule name, you will select the severity of it, you will select the tactics for it, you will enable that rule, then you will put the query that will contain the logic for that rule. After that, you will select the schedule. If automation is needed, you will put an automation and then you will create it. So the process will remain the same whether you create 2 or 200. And the objective is to help you understand and make you familiar with the process, which we did. So we've created the second rule. And is everyone with me on this?
Yes.
Okay. Now I want you to also create these two rules, which is successful logon from one IP and failure from another. Now you will find this rule into Azure activity and say to the activity Azure activity connector. So this is another rule that I want everyone to enable so that you will have at least 4 or 5 rules. Successful logon from IP and failure from another. So and you all need to simulate attack for each rule. For each rule you will simulate the attack and show it to me. Then the another one is attempt to sign in from a disabled account. This is another one that you will create, which is attempt to sign in from disabled account. These two additional that you need to create, where they are, I'll quickly show you. This attempt to sign in from this account, attempt to sign in to disable account is an Entra ID rule. So you will find this rule here, which is when you navigate to Content Hub, you will find Microsoft Entra ID solution. Here's the solution. You can click on status. You will see the solution, Microsoft Entra ID. This is the solution. Just select the solution and then click on manage. Over here, you will see a list of content in the solution, which includes 63 analytics rule, 1 data connector, 11 playbooks and workbooks. So we'll directly go to analytics rule. So over here, you will see this rule, which is attempt to sign in to disable accounts. So just search for this rule and then click on create rule from here. The moment you will click on create rule, it will directly take you to the analytics rule creation wizard, wherein everything will be pre-configured. You don't need to do anything. Everything will be pre-configured. All you need to do is set this threshold. This threshold is right now 3, which means when this activity happens 3 times in a row, then only the alert will be generated. So either you try to do it 3 times or you can reduce it to 1. You will say that, okay, let's do it 1 time. So I'm putting the threshold as 1 so that it will generate the incident as soon as a disabled account is tried to sign in at least once. Entity mapping, everything will be configured. You don't need to do anything. Everything will be automatically configured. You just need to click. Then you need to change this query scheduling. It says it runs once in a day and it looks for data. So please make sure that you may change it to minutes, probably 5 minutes, and look for a data of last 1 day. Why? So that when you simulate the attack, you will be able to get the incident created. That's it. Rest of the information, don't make any changes. Just go with the default settings and hit review plus create. It will validate and then in the end you will save it. I will not hit save because I already have it. Otherwise it will create a redundant analytics rule. So this is what you need to do, which is attempt to sign in to disable accounts. Then there is another rule which is under Azure activity. So we'll go to Azure activity solution that we installed, which is here, Azure activity, hit manage. And over here, you will find the solution. You will find the rule that I have, which is it is not here. It is probably in the same Entra ID only. Let me just double check, guys. No, probably it was part of Defender for. Let me just double check. It should be under Entra ID because this is a sign-in logs. Okay. Yep, it is here. So it is here in Entra ID itself. This is here, which is successful logon from IP and failure from a different IP. So you just need to configure it here also. Now with this, so how Sentinel has changed over a period of time, what would happen in Sentinel in the past? Microsoft Sentinel would have some default analytics rule pre-configured. As soon as you enable Sentinel service, the most common default analytics rule will be pre-configured. And then they would start to generate alerts, but then customers complain stating that they actually don't need them. It is not making sense to them. And these rules are causing a lot of billing to them, because when there are rules, then there is data that gets captured. So that is where Microsoft made some changes to the service. They first came up with the concept of Content Hub, wherein they combined all the related entities to a service. For example, they basically combined all the playbooks, workbooks, data connectors, and analytics rule related to one solution, one use case into one solution, and they put it under Content Hub. So they did a lot of changes in the last couple of years. And as a result of that change today, when you enable the solution, by default, it doesn't even have a single analytics rule created. You will need to manually create it. Now you can always use the existing analytics rule, which are part of the Content Hub, or you can create a custom rule also. You can write your own KQL query. You can search for references over the internet. You can speak to similar customers and identify what are they monitoring, or you can go to top 10 SIEMs or use cases over the internet and accordingly configure it. So that's how this product has evolved over a period of time. Any question, guys? Okay, so the same thing you need to do here. After you create this rule, you need to simulate the attack. Then there is another rule, which is attempt to sign in to disabled accounts. And there is another, which is simulate the attack with this one also. So this is what you need to do from Microsoft Sentinel perspective. Any questions so far?
No, Raghuveer, good.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the next service, because as I said, we will do some configuration on all the three services. So we are done with the Microsoft Sentinel. Now let's pick up Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and let's do some configuration with Defender for Endpoint also in the remaining time that we have for today's session. And tomorrow we have a session at 2 o'clock. Please make sure you all join tomorrow's session, because we'll continue with the existing services, and then we will also do some configuration around AMCAS, MDI, and we'll continue with this, with this momentum. So Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, let's configure some additional settings, some additional capabilities. And the first that I want to configure is compliance policies. So let's configure compliance policy and attack surface reduction policies. These are the two policies that we will configure today, so that we will see the results of them tomorrow when we start the session. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes, Raghu.
Let's move on. Let's go. So Sentinel part is over at this point in time. So we'll move on to the other portal. So we'll navigate to Intune portal. As I said, majority of the configuration that you do with Defender for Endpoint, they are now migrated to Intune portal. Now in Defender for Endpoint, if I go to security portal, hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so if I move to security portal, I will still have some configurations available in security portal with respect to Defender for Endpoint. But then what happens, even if you do the configuration from here, it gets synchronized with Intune, and Intune has more capabilities. So if I click on endpoints here, you will see that I have configuration management module. When I click on configuration management module, I have this option that says endpoint security policy and dashboard. So let's first click on endpoint security policy. When I click on this endpoint security policy, let's see what happens. So I can create a new policy here also. So if I don't use it, just see these policies now. So you can see here, I have two policies, production policy and sample policy. The name is sample policy for endpoint for URL IOC, which I created. If I click on create a new policy, I will need to choose a platform. I'll say Windows 10, 11 and server. Then I need to choose a template. So I also have a templates here, which is related to attack surface reduction rules, Microsoft Defender. Obviously, we'll select this antivirus part, which we have done. This part we have already done. Exclusion we have already done. See, so you don't need to select this firewall. You already have antivirus here. So you have some options here. However, they are not all. You have more capabilities available in Intune portal. And even if you configure something here, this is going to be reflecting in Intune portal already. So let's say device control. So this policy we typically create when we want to control the removable media on our endpoint. So it says Microsoft recommends to have a layered approach to securing removable media, and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint provides multiple monitoring and control features to help prevent threat in unauthorized peripherals from compromising your device. So this is related to device control. Let's create this policy. So all of you click on, go to security.microsoft.com, navigate to Defender, navigate to endpoints, then click on configuration management. After that, click on endpoint security policy, then click on create new policy, select the platform, select the template as device control and hit on create policy. Let me know when everyone is here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we'll create a device control policy. I'll say production, endpoint, policy. Description you can put whatever you wish to. Click next. Then it says need to configure at least one setting. This is related to the device control. So let it load. It's loading as we speak. Okay. So we'll start with removable storage access. You have different types of devices here. So we'll say removable storage. It says deny read access. Now it is WPD, which is this policy setting denies read access to removable device, which may include media players, cellular phones, auxiliary players, displays, and the. If you enable this policy setting, read access is denied to removable storage class. If you disable or do not configure this policy setting, read access is allowed to the removable storage class. So by default on your endpoints, all the USB ports are configured. They are enabled. But with this policy in place, the read access will be denied to storage class, which means if you insert an Airtel data card with which you connect to the internet, it will accept. But if that Airtel data card contains some storage, that storage feature will be disabled. That's the concept. If you insert, so you can insert any device into the USB port, but if the device has the storage capability, that capability will get disabled. So what we will do, we will say, yes, please deny access, which is disabled, right? So, sorry, we will click on enable. So we will enable the deny access. Then deny read access, it says user. So we'll say, yes, enabled. Deny write access, we'll say enabled. So we'll enable the read access and write access both. This is on the removable storage access. Then comes device installation restriction. Now, sometimes what happens when you put plug and play device into your system, plug and play like mouse or keyboard, Wi-Fi mouse, Wi-Fi keyboard, so what it does, the plug and play feature, what it does, it quickly identifies that plug and play device, and in the device manager, it will quickly install the drivers for it. So that's where it is. It says apply layered order of evaluation for allow and prevent device installation policies across all device match criteria. So we will enable it. Allow installation of device that match any of these device IDs, you will enable it. And then you will need to provide the device IDs. So what it is doing, it is applying layered control and it is preventing the installation of devices. But you may have some identified trusted devices in the organization that you want. So for those, you need to put the device ID here. Now there are two ways to configure it. You get the device ID, or the other way is by default, let it get blocked. Put it on your test machine. Just roll out this policy to a few test machines and then connect that device to the test machine. What it will do, it will get blocked, and as a result of which an investigation, the alert will come. Go to that alert. In that alert, you will have an option to whitelist it, and that will automatically add all the information here. Otherwise, you will need to manually add the device IDs. So you do it from that manner. That is the right way of doing it. Allow installation of devices that match any of these instance ID. So we'll just not configure it. So we'll just go to not configure any of this. Then it says, this one is important. Prevent installation of removable devices. We can prevent installation of these devices, but then the challenge is if we prevent installation, then your media, your Airtel data card, any RSA device, or any of that device that needs driver installation will not work. So what we do in production, typically, we always keep it on this part, which is the storage part. My concern is the storage. My concern is about the data leak. I don't want any data leak from my endpoint. For that, I will use this policy enabled, and I'm okay if devices can be installed. Or I will capture the device ID, and then accordingly I will install them. Then comes Bluetooth. This is related to Bluetooth. If on your endpoint you want to enable the Bluetooth service, and then you want that endpoint to be discoverable by another Bluetooth device, that's allow advertising. So typically I will block it. I'll say no, do not allow my device to advertise that Bluetooth status. Allow discoverable mode, no, block it. Allow preparing, it says specifies whether to allow specific bundled Bluetooth peripherals to automatically pair with the host device, no, block it. Why would you need this? Or probably you can create two separate policies, one for servers, one for client systems, because on servers you don't need anything. Why would you want your server to be discoverable? Probably for client you can do it. So all of this you can do it, service list. Then comes connectivity, allow USB connection. Obviously, you can decide whether you want to allow it. See, by default it is allowed. So it is not configured. And by default it is allowed. I can say not allow. I don't want to allow USB, and I don't want to allow also. Then for data protection, which is very important, allow direct memory access DMA, which is a physical port. So I will say do not allow DMA access. Then for Defender is Windows Defender for endpoint. It says allow full scan, removable device scanning. So any which way, since you're not allowing this option here, which is you're not allowing your USB connections. So when you're not allowing USB connection, what is the point of configuring it? USB will not be allowed. But if you allow USB connection, you can come to this place and you can say allowed, which means anytime a removable device is inserted into the system, it will be scanned by Defender. That's the logic here. So you should not create conflicting policies, which means now these two are conflicting. Here I'm saying that allow scanning, but over here I'm saying please do not allow any USB connection. So I would rather say allow USB connection, which is okay, but please scan, please run a full scan. Then comes device control. Here I can add devices that I wanted to include. So I will just say no for a moment. Then DMA guard, which is again the same direct memory access, and then storage. It says removable disk deny write access. So I can also configure it whenever. So probably you allow USB drives in your environment on your endpoints, but you do not want any write operation, which means you want read operation. So if there is a file in the USB drive that I need to copy on my endpoint, with the read I can copy, but I will write, I will disable, which means from my endpoint nothing will go on the USB. So I will say the removable disk deny write access, I will enable it. So now nobody will be able to write anything on the USB from the endpoints. So this is how you go through each and every control, keeping in consideration the security requirements of your environment, of your customer project that you're working in. You will pick and choose, you will make decisions. Now, sometimes these decisions you cannot take by yourself. So you will need to collaborate with your customer stakeholders while you arrive at the decision. And in the end, you will hit next. Then the next thing, which is group. Now you are going to apply. So you've selected the controls. Who do you want to enforce it on? This is where you need to find a group. So it says search by group name. So over here, you will have a group. So I have a couple of groups here that I can search for. For example, I had a SOC group. So I can put SOC here. Okay, so I can put it on my SOC group, which contains my production endpoints. You can select the group here, and then by default it is included. You can also put an exclude group also. The policy will not apply to that group, right? So we'll just go with include. So I'm including my 4 devices for this policy. I'll click on next, and then in the end I will say save. So this is how I create a device control policy that gets applied to the scope that I have decided, which is 4 devices in my network. That's what device control policy is all about, to block removable storage, USB device installation, USBs, device installation, includes Bluetooth. Is everyone with me on this, on device control policy?
After configuring, I'm not able to click on next. It's faded. Something I missed.
Something is missing then. Something that you need to, some option that you selected but did not provide the input to that option. That's the reason it is saying you're not getting next option. So this next option will be faded if I select some configuration and do not provide the input. For example, if I select enable it, and if I do not provide, I say add but I do not provide any value here. If I go to down at the bottom, the next will be faded because I have a field or a configuration waiting for input. So you need to make sure that you either provide the input or you remove that information.
Yeah, I'm cross-checking it.
Now the next is available, right? This is the concept. So I've created this policy, the device control policy, and the challenge is I will not be able to test this policy or simulate an attack against this policy because I do not have a physical device. I'm saying on my laptop, I already have McAfee, and I don't want to play with my laptop that I use for training, and I don't have a separate device here. And on servers, you can't do it. But if you have a separate laptop, you can quickly test this policy. How? Just onboard that laptop into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint by putting the script on it. Wait for a couple of minutes to an hour for have that laptop device status shown as managed by MDE, and then add that laptop to the same group where this policy is applicable. And then you will see that on that laptop, you will not be able to, or you will be able to, depending on what you've configured in the policy. So that's a quick way of testing this policy. Okay, so we have created this policy. Now, any policy that you create will synchronize with Intune. The reason we want to create policy in Intune, because in Intune you have more additional options available, something that you don't have here. For example, over here, you do not have a compliance policy, device compliance policy, which I don't see here, which is missing from here, and that policy is available in Intune. So if I go to Intune, all right, I signed myself out by mistake. Okay, so now I'm back. So if I go to Intune, in the Intune, you will see that I have additional policies. So if in the Intune, you need to be here, which is endpoint security. Under endpoint security, you see a lot of additional capabilities are available. Anything that you saw there is already there, but you have additional capabilities. For example, the policy that you created, that policy will come here. That policy will come here under endpoint detection and response. So we will now create a policy in Intune, which is device compliance policy. So let's click on device compliance. Let's click on endpoint security. Under endpoint security, you have this policy. It is under, when you click on endpoint security, under manage, there is a policy with the name device compliance. This is the last configuration that we will do for today. So let's click on device compliance. Is everyone with me? Shall we get started?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm getting some information here. It says that Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Connector is active for Windows, but not included in any assigned compliance policy. To protect these platforms, set up a compliance policy. So we'll create a compliance policy now. So we'll hit create policy and we'll select a platform. Compliance policy basically means that I will put forward some baseline configuration that I would expect all my endpoints to a specific platform to adhere to that configuration. So since I have Windows servers in my environment, Windows client and server in my environment, I'll select the platform as Windows 10 and later, not Windows 8 and later, because Windows 8 and later will include Windows 8. And I don't have Windows 8. So I'll go with Windows 8 and later. And this later will also include server operating system. So Windows 8 and later. So it says, then hit create. When you create compliance policy, you will need to provide the basic information. So I can say Windows clients and server compliance policy. And here I can mention this policy is applicable on production endpoints hosting Windows client and server OS. That's it. Platform and profile type you've already selected. You will directly go to the compliance settings. Now these are the compliance settings that you need to do. Give me a moment. So let's start with the compliance setting. So the first custom compliance. So you can also put, a custom compliance through a JSON file. If you have a compliance settings, you can put that here, but it requires additional configuration. So we'll not go with this part. I'll show you some compliances regarding this. For example, let's see the compliance regarding device health. It says Windows, and this is applicable for Windows 10 and 11, right? So I can put a compliance here that all my Windows 10 and 11 should have BitLocker encryption enabled. They should have secure boot enabled. They should have code integrity enabled, right? Now, when I'm saying this, what this policy will do, this policy will scan the entire devices which are in scope, and it will see whether on those devices secure boot is enabled or not, BitLocker encryption is enabled or not, code integrity is enabled or not. And if it is not enabled, then the policy will return those devices as non-compliant, and it will also show you that where exactly they are non-compliant. So this basically helps me to identify. Let's take a use case. As an admin, I'm responsible to manage 10,000 plus endpoints. Out of those 10,000, I have around 3,000 plus client operating systems, which are using a combination of Windows 10 and 11. Now, I want to know what is the current version of those Windows 10 and Windows 11. And I have a compliance in my company that says that any Windows 10 and 11 should be a version 21H2 and above. So I can quickly put a policy and I will quickly identify any endpoint which is non-compliant. Then comes device properties. This is where I can put it. So I can put the operating system version. I'll say that all my devices in my environment should be with this minimum operating system version. So I can configure it. And for that, I will need the version settings like this. It says select the oldest OS version a device can have. The operating system version is defined as major, minor, build, revision. So you need to put this information actually, and this information you will need to get. So here you will get the various, or you can export this information also. So you need this information. Let me see if I have it handy. I'll share it. Otherwise, we'll configure this part tomorrow. Okay. So on the documentation, they've revised the documentation, and on the documentation, they are not providing the version information for all the devices that they would provide in the past. But what we can do, we can get the version information. Let's say my laptop has a Windows 10 and I want all my client with Windows 10 in the environment with the same version. So what I will do, if I want that information, because I need the minimum information, so what I will do, I will open a command prompt on my laptop on any device that in my environment, and I'll say version. It shows me the version which is with this format. I actually need to put the information in this format actually. So it is Microsoft Windows. In this format, the information will go. This shows me the version of it. So this is what I will do. I will configure it here. So I'll put this information like this. So I'll pick up the information from here, starting with 10, which is Windows 10. So it says this is the, make sure that there is no space at the beginning. So this basically shows the version information in this format, which is major is Windows 10, then minor, then build, and then revision. So 10.0.190.45.45.29. This is the format. So what I'm saying that all the devices in my environment should be with this build version. Then similarly, I want to put the maximum build version also. That my devices, if I have any endpoint which is greater than that version, that is also not allowed. Which is minimum than this version, which is also not allowed. So I would just rather go ahead and put the information like this, and I'll say let's 6. I'm just putting the random number. It says must be greater than the minimum version. So I would say 10.1. I'm just putting a random, I'm saying assuming this, but you need to get this information exactly from a system that you need. Then it says minimum OS version for all mobile devices. Now this was for the client. Similarly, for all mobile devices, you can put the version, and that information you can also find from your mobile devices, like in this manner. So I'll just say not configured. So this is about the minimum OS version, right? Then comes the configuration manager compliance. Now, since we do not need configuration, we don't have configuration manager, we'll just leave it as it is. Typically, compliance policy is more about ensuring that a specific configuration is enabled on our endpoints, and the endpoints are running with minimum OS configuration, because that directly impacts the health of that endpoint. It should not happen that you have endpoints running with an oldest version of Windows 10. That may invite some viruses or some misconfigurations or vulnerabilities on the system. That's the logic. So we'll put this information. That configuration manager we cannot do because we don't have it running. Then comes system security. Here I can put the configurations related to the passwords. So I can put the configuration says require a password to unlock mobile device. So I can say require. Simple passwords. Do you want to create simple passwords? It says the setting specifies whether to block mobile devices from using simple passwords, such as 1234, 321, the repetitive numbers and all that. So I'll say block. Please do not allow simple passwords. Password type we can define whether it's alphanumeric, numeric. I'll say alphanumeric. Password complexity, I can say that my password should require all of this. The minimum password length I can define is, let's say, 15 characters. Maximum minutes of inactivity before password is required. I'd say you leave your system and then you go out and then as per the security policy, I will say that if the system is idle for more than 1 minute, it should get locked. And then the user, when tries to unlock it, will require a password. So I can put this, you can test it easily on your endpoints also, because you have a Windows 10 endpoint, you can test this configuration. Password expiration, I will put it, let's say 45 days or 60 days, 90 days, whatever. So you can put the password policy. Number of previous passwords that you will not allow to reuse, I would say 10. My user should not be using last 10 passwords. Required password when device returns from idle state. Yes, when device is idle, you will require password. Encryption. Require encryption of data storage on device? Yes, I require encryption. Device security, do you require? Because these settings you've selected on the top. So when you've selected these settings, then it will ask you the configuration here. So do you require device firewall? Yes. TPM? Yes, which is for secure boot. Antivirus? Yes. Anti-spyware? Yes. So you'll put all of this configuration. Now Defender anti-malware? Yes, I require. Microsoft Defender anti-malware minimum version if you need, you can put here. So here you can see the minimum version of Defender, for example, this, and you can check the version and you will automatically get it. So you will need to configure that part. And then Microsoft Defender anti-malware security intelligence up to date, real-time protection. Yes, I need it. Then some additional configuration. I'm saying they have added some additional configuration, which I did not see in my last session, which I delivered in April. So it says Microsoft Defender for endpoint configuration, which is require the device to be at or under the minimum machine risk score. This is another configuration. All my endpoints, Microsoft Defender for endpoint solution based on the number of incidents and alerts generated from a device will give device a score, risk score. So what I'm putting it here that all my devices, it says require the devices to be at or under this score. So I want all my devices to be at low risk score. So this policy will then highlight all the devices which are at low and above. So this is the policy. So you see a lot of configuration here with the device compliance policy. Then we'll go to the next, which is the device compliance. So here is specify the sequence of actions to non-compliant devices. Mark device non-compliant. So whenever any of the compliance settings that you have configured, if those settings are not met, then when do you want to mark the device non-compliant? So here the setting is configured as immediately. And after the device is marked as non-compliant, because the device is not running a minimum version, device is not have secure boot enabled, device has this anomaly, then you want to send an email to user. So you can select the user information also, right? You can select all of this. Then comes the add device to the retired list. You can put the device to the retired list also. So all of this configuration you can basically select. So I will just delete it because I don't have this information. So what I'm saying that mark device non-compliant immediately, and that will be shown under compliance policy. When you go to the compliance policy, it will show you that information. Then click on next. Now the assignment, very important, that who do you want to assign this policy to? So since I've created this policy for my Windows 10 and above, which includes my server, obviously here I want to apply this policy to all the production environment, or I want to apply it to the entire organization. So my entire organization means 4 devices that I've onboarded. So I will select those devices. So I will directly add them through the group, which is SOC group here. This contains all my devices. So I've selected it. If I want to exclude anything, probably I have a non-production environment and I don't really bother about the that environment in terms of whether that is configured with minimum OS version, whether that has some security configuration enabled. If I don't bother, I will add that group into exclude group. But in that case, your include group, those devices should be a subset of include group. So that's how I do it. Then I'll click on next. And in the end, I will put this policy. So since I have taken the minimum OS version from my laptop, which is Windows 10 that I have not updated for a long time, what will happen tomorrow when we come to this policy, we will see that our devices are compliant because they are running with the higher version of it. So this is how you put a compliance policy. Obviously, you cannot see the report right now. You will need to give it at least a couple of hours to get this policy propagate to all the devices and get the information. So this is about device policy, which is very important that we use device compliance policy, which is an important feature of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. But now this feature is only available in Intune. So this is the compliance policy. So I'll add this policy also. So compliance policy, which is device compliance policy, is OS version, configuration, MDE version, MDE risk score, etc. So this is what we have configured, and we'll see the result of this policy tomorrow. Obviously, the policy will only return the results when your endpoints are up and running. If your endpoints are shut down, it will not return any result because it will not be able to reach to that endpoint to identify whether the required configurations are enabled, whether the endpoint is running with minimum or maximum OS version. So what you need to do, you can probably turn your devices on at 1 o'clock, and within an hour, the policy will have the information available to itself. Or if your devices are already on, just leave it up and running for next half an hour or 1 hour, and the policy will do its job. So this is what we did. Now this is something, since we have already gone beyond the scheduled time frame, this is something that we will do tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll talk about rest of the things. I'm open to questions if you have any, guys.
Raghuveer, actually, the policies that we have configured in Intune now, so does they do not conflict with the group policy that is normally created for the domain systems? Normally we configure them right with the user password.
Why would it conflict with group policy? The group policy is doing a different job. This policy is doing a different job. Now, if through the group policy you have enabled certain restrictions, then they will continue to run. If this policy has certain restrictions, it will take effect. So there is no point of conflict here.
No, like for the user, say, let's say I have configured them with the minimum length of password of 8 characters, and in Defender I have
You're
configured
coming
it
from
for.
that point of view. Obviously,
Yes.
there will be a conflict, and this policy will take the precedence.
Okay, Defender policies will take the precedence.
Obviously, yeah. And this is about optimization. You should not have conflicting policies. For example, you could have another PAM solution like CyberArk or ForgeRock, where you have also configured the policy. Or let's say you've configured the policy at the now this policy. So there are two types of passwords here. One is device login, that could be different, and Entra ID login, that could be different, right? So if there is a conflict, then if there's a conflict between group policy and Defender for endpoint policy, the endpoint policy will take precedence, right? Because when it comes to the, so there is a concept that you need to understand in Windows that we use, which is a LSDOU, local system, site, domain, and OU, right? So this is what you, so that group policy is applied at the OU level. Now this is how it starts. So local system will have always the precedence. If there is a no policy on local system, then site policy will have precedent. If there is no site policy, then domain policy will have precedence. If there is no domain policy, then OU policy will have precedence. And this is where group policy comes at OU level. So your local system will always have precedence, and local system has endpoint policy configured. So your endpoint policy will take the precedence as per the logic. Make sense?
Yes, yes.
Great. All right. So this is tomorrow's agenda. The other thing is tomorrow you also have an assessment wherein you will need to show me the working of these solutions. The solutions that we have configured yesterday and today, you will need to show me the working of it also. So that's your assessment. Okay, what has happened? No, I seem that I copied something else. So you have a week second assessment also. This is what you need to do. So, okay, probably I'll put it from the top here, which is here. This is the assessment that we need to do, which is here. So that's also in the agenda for tomorrow. You all will need to make sure. So we'll do more work configuration tomorrow, but this is also in the agenda that you all need to make sure that this is available, which is you will need to configure an IOC based on URL domain, software and application, and show me the functioning of the same, and the analytics rule in Sentinel, and demonstrate the functioning of the same, which could be default or custom, which you created today. So this is what you need to demonstrate. Is everyone with me on this? Yes, no, maybe guys. Okay, great. All right. I think we can close the session for today.